All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming. Glad you all love the song. It's always nice to take just a little bit of a break, especially if you've been doing back-to-back Zooms. All righty, so today we are continuing our conversation, and today we're focused on people, right? Our journey so far, at the beginning of the week, we talked about some of the foundational terms. We've talked about ACEs. Yesterday, we had a great conversation about data and data equity. And today we're going to talk about people. We're going to have the conversation about human capacity, but also this recognition of our need to examine our own bias, our own unconscious bias, implicit bias, all the words that we're using right now as a way of truly understanding the fact that bias can get in the way of how we deliver service. So to kick us off, if you haven't been to one of these sessions before, I like to use Mentimeter. So there are two ways you can do this. Show your camera to the QR code on the screen, and that will put you right into the Mentimeter. Or you can open up a browser right here on your computer, type in menti.com. It's going to ask you for a code. Simply type in the code, and it's simple. You only have to do this one time. All right. So to give people practice, I always like to start off with a pretty easy Mentimeter question. And the one today is describe yourself in one word. Now, when you get to Menti, I've given you a few other words in case you have a hard time choosing just one. So I know there's some people like, I can't choose one. So I gave you some more options. Great, they're coming in here. And as you know about word clouds, right? As the votes come in, it'll show up on the screen. And if we have any people who use the same words, those will get a bit bigger on the screen. So great, folks are getting it. Wonderful, coming in. Coming in now, our word cloud is filling up. Fabulous. Good, okay, look at this. Awesome. Look at all the characteristics here in the room of how people would describe themselves. This is fabulous. What a great group of characteristics. So hopefully everyone's figured out Mentimeter. Super simple. When there is an opportunity to share your thoughts by Menti, a slide like this will come up. You just type it, text it right in. It'll show up on the screen for us. So thank you all for participating in that. All right, to get us started, as always, I like to center us into our topic and our conversation today. I'll ask that everybody grab a piece of paper. If you don't have one in front of you already, for those who have been here, you're probably prepared and already know that I was going to do this. For those of you who are new, you'll take your piece of paper and simply create 4 quadrants, just like this, okay? I'm just going to ask you 4 simple questions for you to kind of think and reflect on as we get started. The first thing I'm going to have you all do, though, is to try to take a moment to clear our minds from everything that you might have been doing before our time together started. So I'm going to set a 40-second timer, and all I'm going to ask you to do is right in the middle of your paper where the 2 lines cross, you are going to create a spiral, just like you're seeing here on the slide. Okay, so just 40 seconds of time here. I always encourage us to focus on your breathing, to be intentional, to do deep breaths. You'll be surprised that you're holding your breath sometimes. Just take a moment to release your mind, relax for a moment. Forget about the emails you have to answer, the stuff you have to do afterwards, and attempt to be fully present in our time together. Okay, our first question in the top left corner. When you think about inclusion, what comes to mind? When you think about inclusion, what comes to mind? Okay. Our second question in the top right corner, what fears do you have about prioritizing diversity? What fears do you have about prioritizing diversity? Okay. Our third question, bottom left corner of your paper. What do you think is our biggest potential for growth? What do you think is our biggest potential for growth? Right. And our last question here is just to share a thought of what you're hoping to learn from the session today. What are you hoping to learn from this session today? Okay, awesome. All righty. So let us get started today. I'm very excited about our session today. I have two primary goals. One is to spend some time really thinking about bias and having us critically examine the way bias impacts prevention practice. And then I want to talk about bias and privilege and how it shows up. Ooh, and I see a typo. Look at that. I'll have to correct that in the future. All right. So, to get started, I thought it might be good for us to do a bit of personal exploration around our culture, our bias. Sometimes these are the places that we can be blind to. The content that I am sharing with you comes as a part of content from the World Trust. They have a racial equity learning. They actually have a volume 1 and 2 now. The particular activity that we're going to do today actually comes from their volume 1. It's a really great resource if you're wanting to dig in deeper around conversations around equity and bias. The entire curriculum is actually really wonderful. So for this first activity, you will need to do a little bit of writing. We'll start actually as an individual activity first. And let me see how many people we have. Okay, great. What we'll do is after we do the writing part, we'll actually have a bit of small group conversation. So Steve, let me see, I can't see right now if you're on with me, but what we'll want to do is actually do some breakout rooms for folks to talk more individually after we do this first activity. I always like to give people a heads up that you're going to be talking more intimately. That way folks know and understand and get prepared for that. I know breakout rooms scare folks. I want to, if anyone's having some anxiety, you got about 5 to 7 minutes to work through it and be prepared to talk with another person. All right. So for this first activity, I have 4 questions we're all going to answer individually. And then I'll share what we'll do past that. So the first thing I want you to think about here is your name. And does it have a story? Does it have a meaning? Okay. So I'll give you a few minutes to kind of think of that. If you need to write a few things down, feel free to do that. But just consider your name. Is there any meaning or story behind it from your family? The second question, and feel free, all the questions will be up here, so feel free to answer at your leisure. No reason to feel rushed here. The second question is to think about, how do you identify racially, ethnically, and I'm going to say and or culturally? Okay, so answer all three, 1, 2, whatever feels right for you. The third question, the first time I noticed racial difference was. For this one, just fill in the blank for your experience. If you can think about when it first happened to you, maybe how old you were, what the context was. And I'll go ahead and show the last question, and I'll just keep this up for a little bit. What is the current racial landscape of your world? Think about your work, your home, your social activities. With whom do you find yourself associating most? So as some of you are still thinking about your answers, I don't want you to feel rushed here, but I want to just give you a sense of where we're going with this. I want to take this information, give us an opportunity to chat with each other and have conversation. And so we're going to go into small breakout rooms of about 3 people. And in your breakout room, you'll do 2 things. 1, you'll introduce yourself to the folks in your room. And then 2, you can either choose one of these questions to share with the group, or if you're uncomfortable sharing a question, then just share your reflection on what it was like to answer these questions. Anything going through your mind? Are you having any feelings? Anything going on for you? So you have 2 options. Choose whatever fits best for your level of comfort. Okay, so I'm going to show the slide here just to remind everyone the 2 things you'll do: introduce yourself, and then just have a bit of a conversation about what you've written here and what your thoughts are so far. Okay, so Steve is going to put us in breakout rooms of about 3 people. We will do, so if we do 3 people, let's see, we're right about 8, 12, 20. Let's do 15 minutes. Actually, let's do 12 minutes. Steve,
Okay.
let's do 12
Nope,
minutes.
no problem.
And so
12
we'll have
minutes.
you all talk, and then we'll come back and have a large group debrief.
All right, here we go, people.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Thank you all. Hopefully you all had a bit of a discussion. I know that if it was for us, I know the 12 minutes went really fast. So, but I want to take just a quick moment here, since you all have had a practice warming up your voice. Anyone have a reflection they want to share with the room while we're on this for a moment? Any thoughts people want to share, aha moments from this activity, or even chatting with folks in your rooms?
I can share.
Sure.
Something that I share with my folks in my room was about question number 3.
Mhm.
When was the first time that I became aware about diversity or something like that? And I share with them that I became more aware of that since I moved from Brazil to the US 5 years ago, because suddenly I needed to fit in some boxes. Like, I'm Latina, but in Brazil, I'm not Latina, I'm just Brazilian. So it's been kind of an experience. But then this exercise made me think that discrimination, diversity, racism is existent in Brazil as well. I was just privileged to not be impacted negatively by it, because in Brazil, I'm seen as a white person. So I was protected against racism. But when I think about studying or working, there are few people of color actually working with me or studying with me, because the opportunities are not the same. They are usually the ones living in slumber, like favelas, like in community, like very poor areas in Brazil. So it just made me think about that. Sometimes I feel here that I'm not playing the victim, but that I'm discriminated against here. But I may be I may was the one discriminating against before, and I didn't know that.
That's fascinating. Wow. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that complexity of culture, and nationality, and how in one place, to say that you were thought of as white in Brazil, right? And I imagine it's because of the complexion of your skin, right? Yeah. And then to come to America and it's like, oh, you're Latino
You're
now.
brown. Yeah, you're
Right,
Latino. You're
right,
brown.
right, right. Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that.
I think I've come across the same thing where in Latin American countries, like, it's the whole relationship with race is completely different. And it makes it really hard, like things that we, like the way that we see things from the US perspective. Like there are things in Latin American countries that were like, whoa, how is that okay? But, on the other hand, it's like a completely different history. It's a different, um, perspective in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of stuff that, that it's not directly analogous, and it's almost like a lot of it's almost like in Latin America there is a lot, it's more like colorism rather than racism. Whereas it's based more, I mean, like in the US I feel like it's just, there's definitely, it's based on your perceived race, whereas it is really more on your color.
Right.
In Latin America, and different, and there's a lot of sort of awareness of color, and not afraid to like call people out and call, and say and comment on what color people or skin is.
Right.
And that's something that we don't do here.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. I'll offer, anyone else have a thought they want to share before we
Yes.
move forward? Yes.
I would like to share the group that I had. A young lady, she's from Russia, and my daughter had went to Russia when she was in high school. And I grew up in the South on a farm, and so I had shared that we have been sold a real bad deck about human life, because there's only one race, and that is the human race. doesn't matter what color you are. They used to be saying if, when you bleed, it's just one color, the red blood. So, due to not understanding science is why we have the people on the earth, why they look the way they look. And so, that hasn't been dealt with in real depth, but I can't go into that. But overall, growing up, and right now I live in Washington, D.C. So I've never allowed that to take any precedence over my life. And so I shared that. And even to this date, I still do not allow any type of racial matters. If I see anything, I'll address it in a professional manner so that we can move on for the common cause of what we're there to do, and not to be stuck on no race, because that's not going to get any food grown. Because as a farmer, you have to grow your food, based on the science, not by how you look.
Right.
So I just wanted to share that. Thank you so kind.
Thank you. And your name is Millicent?
Millicent Toye.
Millicent Toye. Thank you for sharing your
Allowing
voice.
me to come. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so thankful for what you said, because this is something that I've been thinking about and grappling with, the fact that we even use the word race to talk about categorizing people.
Yes.
Because if you do know science, we're all humans.
Yes, right. Amen.
And it's when you do have skin that looks like mine, it's mind-boggling to consider
Yes.
that there are people who actually believe that, what we used to believe as a society, what was like baked into our consciousness as people. It's quite interesting to really consider. And I do look forward to the day where we really start that social construct. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
So we've still got some work to do, you all, on this part here, because unfortunately, we're the choir in this room, which is what happens when we hold sessions like this, right? We're the choir, the folks who need to be unlearning race aren't folks who sign up for sessions like this, right? So I'm always thinking about how do we, spread the word? How do we create communication? Like the question at the beginning is like, what is our biggest potential for change? For me, I'm like, how do we embed the unlearning of racism in society? That's where I'm like, that's our biggest potential for creating change. So thank you for saying what you said. I really appreciate that, because that needs to be talked about more than we have talked about it. So thank you for that, Millicent. Wonderful. Okay, you guys are getting me excited. I get excited every time we talk and do this. But let me just share here a few more things, and then I'll open it up for us to have more open discussion here before we close out today. I want to just talk a little bit about bias and privilege. And I am like, how in the world did I miss spelling privilege wrong? I have spelled it wrong more than once, my gosh, and I have not seen it till now. Interesting. Now I'm really gonna have to check it, because every time I see it, I'm like, that is not how you spell that word. So the topic we think about, you all, is unconscious bias. And I think what has been challenging is, unfortunately, as much as we know and have the science now that there's no such thing as race, the concepts around what race are, what has been taught about it, live in a place of our mind that is the unconscious network of our brain. And what is so challenging is that we as humans love creating meaning. We like to name and categorize everything. Okay. And unfortunately, we have applied that to each other. We've applied it to ourselves too, which really makes it challenging for some people to get rid of some of the age-old things that they have been taught about particular people who look a particular way. There's been a lot of research that's looked at unconscious and implicit bias and how it impacts our decision-making. And we still have so much more work to do on this. Many of you in this room, I'm sure, have heard of the Harvard implicit bias test. Some of you probably have taken it yourself. I've taken it a few times, and I know I have biases that I need to work on, And so it's one of those tools that I think is really great at looking at that. The other part about this conversation is the question around privilege. And I think a lot of times people have a hard time understanding what privilege is. So I do want to just talk about that very quickly here. There's a video that I want to share with you all. You know, I love my videos. And this one is from BuzzFeed, which I think does a great job. In this one, they talk about and describe a privilege walk. Some of you may have taken a privilege walk yourself. I think it's a wonderful exercise of thinking about the complexity of privilege and how we all have some level of privilege in life. And this type of activity helps to kind of remind folks of the spaces of privilege that they do hold in life. So I'll share this video with you all. And so you
Some people are born into families where they have to walk miles just to get water. All I have to do is turn on a faucet. That's privilege.
If you have ever tried to change your speech, if you were embarrassed about your clothes or house, if you would never think twice about calling the police when trouble is
I think privilege is when some people have some things and other people don't have things.
I feel privilege is something that you don't even really have control over.
I think it'd be silly for me to say I don't have a fair amount of privilege, considering like the country I live in and the job I get to do and the college I was allowed to go to.
I suppose being a white male will help me end up somewhere towards the front, but I'll take a few steps back from being gay.
I don't think I'll make it to the front. I think I'll maybe be in the middle. That's just a gut feeling I have.
If your parents work nights and weekends to support your family, take one step back. If you can show affection for your romantic partner in public without fear of ridicule or violence, take one step forward. If you were embarrassed about your clothes or house while growing up, take one step back. If you have ever been diagnosed as having a physical or mental illness or disability, take one step back. If you have ever been bullied or made fun of based on something you can't change, take one step back. If you get time off for your religious holidays, take one step forward. If you came from a supportive family environment, if you can see a doctor whenever you feel the need, if you are able to move through the world without fear of sexual assault, if you took out loans for your education, if there were more than 50 books in your house growing up. So these are your final positions.
I think it felt kind of strange for everyone.
It's a hard thing to discuss or even reflect on. It was very awkward.
I think when you can represent it so visually like this and so immediately, it definitely takes on a new form.
I think we were like all joking around in the beginning. It was pretty lighthearted, and as soon as the questions started coming in, the mood shifted immediately, and we all it was just silent.
Just looking back and seeing like a bunch of people behind you is not a good feeling.
It's like weird how you want to like hold on to explaining a certain privilege, like, oh, but that's not actually me because like I had to work really hard for that. So it's weird to like take a step forward when you feel like you're taking a step forward with someone else, but you wear a lot of the baggage of like how those things were hard.
It was like more emotional than I thought it would be.
It reminded me of when they talk about slavery in high school and you feel like angry for a few days, but then you just realize like, this is how it is.
For me, it was kind of frustrating almost to look back and see how much further some people were behind me, and realizing that, you know, a lot of that stuff, no amount of hard work or even legislation can make up that gap.
It's interesting being an Asian American because you're not really sure where you fall on the spectrum of privilege.
I know that for me, one of the reasons I ended up so far back was that there are questions around safety as an African American, as a woman, as a gay woman. There are just so many different ways that I don't feel safe.
I feel like I just learned to be grateful for what you have. You know, we're in such a huge society where it's always complaining about what you don't have.
It just shows you that for some families, like each family, you're meant to do better. My grandparents did good, my parents did good, and I'll do even better.
I do think if you're not like aware of privilege, you should do this exercise, but it's more complicated.
Okay. So I love that video. I think it's very well done and so thoughtful. What I want to share with you all is this wheel of power and privilege. As a way of kind of thinking about all of the various identities and dimensions of our human existence. And each one of us can look at a wheel like this and see places where maybe there's some aspects of our life that we're on the inner circle where we have a bit more power and privilege. And there may be some aspects of our identity that place us on the outskirts of this circle where you experience oppression. And so as you all kind of take a look and glance at this, and these are resources that you have in your digital workbook, I really encourage you all to think about this wheel for yourself and to potentially make note from these wedges, which of these wedges are you closer to the center? Which of these wedges do you find yourself on the outskirts where you might experience oppression? Because we all do experience both. Truly. And as you think of this for yourself, consider those places where you do experience privilege, places where you experience oppression, how these systems interact with each other. And really, most importantly, for the places where you do have power and privilege, I encourage you to think about how you use it. How do you leverage it for advocacy, either for yourself, advocacy for others who aren't able to have a voice? Because that's where I think we have really great ability to make change and contribution in society, where we see our places of power and privilege and then use them for something and for some good. I'll tell you all, when I first did this activity, where I actually went through and marked the places where I feel like I experience power versus marginalization. And I walked into this activity assuming most of what I was going to experience or check off was going to be all oppression. And it wasn't the truth for me, you know? And so I had to have this moment of reflection to say, I do have places of power. What do I do with it now? How do I use it? How do I leverage it? For me, in the world of SUD prevention and as a business owner, I use it to do things like this, to offer trainings, to offer webinars. Because I get to do a lot of strategic planning, I'm always pushing the clients I work with to truly think about how are they embedding DEI? How are they truly bringing equity into action and more than just a part of their mission statement, or more than just a statement on their website? Where's the tangible action that's connected to that? And so I encourage each of you who are here today to think about your privilege and your power and really how you can wield it towards good. Because to me, that's where the action really comes into play here. So I want to bring up a Mentimeter just to check and tap in with you all. What are you thinking and feeling right now? What's going through your mind? And then, of course, I want to open it up our last 10 minutes together for conversation. If folks want to share their voice by mic, we'll do that too. So let me actually show the Menti vote here just in case that went away for you all. And just to share your thoughts right now. And this is going to create a word cloud also. Wonderful. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. We got some words coming in here. Curious, inspired, hopeful, empowered, thoughtful, privileged, blessed. I like that word. Empowered, grateful. We got some sadness in the room. Emotional, validated. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts, your feelings. Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing this. I appreciate everyone stepping into the place of vulnerability to just share the topic, what's going through your mind, what you're feeling right now. I do believe those things are valid to share in the room and in the space. Yes, I will drop the link to that video in the YouTube. The link to the video from YouTube in the chat. I will do that. Okay. And so I'm actually going to stop sharing here because at this point, I'd love to just talk with you all a bit. We've got about 10 minutes left of our time together. So anyone have any thoughts they want to share? Feel free to unmute and share your thoughts in this space.
Yeah, I'll talk about the conversation that you and I were having when everyone was in the breakout rooms, the 10 questions. And my observation, I've probably heard this and or said this in my life that racism is a learned behavior. It's not something that we're born. At least that's not been my experience. And I've said that. But when we were talking about it, I realized, wow, because I went back to my earliest memory and I realized that really from the beginning, it was more, I can remember thinking how it seemed that it wasn't right that people made fun of me or and then there was an encouragement to make fun of others because I don't think I saw a Black person or a Hispanic until I was in 4th grade. And it's something seemed like I just didn't like it. Can't tell you exactly the feeling, but then as I got older, and as adolescents kind of pick up sides, so to speak, I could see how it became even more identified. And then so that really makes me stop and think and realize how learned that is and how reinforced it became as I went into middle school and then high school and then into the workforce. And there's this divisiveness between skin color and gender. And all of that was learned compared to the example I gave the first time I would have ever thought there was a difference between somebody who had a different skin color than me. I was just like kind of like surprised by it, but it was naive. It wasn't anything derogatory, I don't think. But then later it became more of a I'm different than you are kind of thing. And how I learned that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Steve.
Also, I would like to share Mr. Steve when he said racism is a learned behavior, and it is. And racism is a behavior with a small group of people that have a little network to, and the masses of the people suffer from the little small racism that goes on in society. We are many and they are few. So if we would just start addressing some of the things that the few does, then we would have a better outcome. And that's a definite, because as I said, they are few and we are many. And so we have to break the cycle by, like what Mr. Steve just said, we have to join that. And we as a group, see, there's power in few. So like Ms. Nicole said earlier, we're just a little group here, so we could probably move a lot of mountains with what we're doing, because I think that would change, but that would change some of the racism that the few do. And so we would have to, start, as Ms. Nicole and Mr. Steve said, we could just start a network and just saying, let's address the matter. Let's, say, this is affecting many people, like some of the groups a while ago with the sadness. We shouldn't be sad. There's no reason for us to be sad, depression, off and on. And we have too much of that. I just got some data yesterday. But how many millions of people every day, from heart attacks. Heart attacks is a result of your heart aches. So not because of food and diet, it's the aching. So let me just be quiet. So thank you, Mr. Steve and Ms. Nicole. I appreciate it. I can just talk.
Thank you for lifting your voice in this space. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom. Really, really do. Really do. Is there anyone else who wanted to share anything? We've got about 5 minutes left. I love that, death by 1,000 cuts.
I've been thinking about the generational effect of, or I guess the generational effect on racism and people's perspectives on racism. Thinking about my grandfather who grew up in South Georgia, and when he was young, slavery was done, But they had people that were working for them who had to come to the back door. They could never come to the front door. And I can imagine the language that was used in talking about us and them. And then, he raised my mom, and then my mom had me, and I grew up around him, and I'm sure it was much watered down. And he was such a loving man and loved everyone, but yet there were things that he would say that I was just always used to hearing him say. And then I grew up and I became a parent, and my mom didn't use that language around me and talk about people that way, but every once in a while something would come out that I can remember my grandfather saying. And then as I grew up and went off into the world, those things, I don't know if it's my education or my experience, those things fell away. Sometimes I can still hear them, but my children have never heard those words or those references or attitudes. And so it, I'm thinking of how many generations it has to be before people are aware of what they're leaving behind and the vision that they're moving forward with.
I love that. Thank you for sharing even the notice of the generational changes. I appreciate you sharing that, Chris. And I've been thinking myself too, how many more generations will it take, Because there are times we forget we're closer to that past than we think, when you really think about it. I was raised by a woman who was born in 1929, and sure, slavery was over, but she was very close to it. And given her experience of what it was to be a woman in brown skin during the time that she was born and lived, she passed some of those things on to me for how not to like or trust the white people who looked like this because of, can you imagine what she lived through? You know what I mean? Trusting could mean death. So I'm here in 2023 doing DEI work, having to work through the stuff that I learned from a woman who was raised in a segregated society. So it's like, man, we really have to think that it's not so far back in the past that we say that it is of the experience, So thank you for even sharing how it's transitioned and the efforts you've taken to make sure that your children don't hear or carry that language into the families that they create in the future, Thank you for that. Wow. Oh, what a wonderful conversation. My heart is warmed. I have some chills. I really appreciate you all's time today. Truly, truly, truly.